Okay, every day a new technology. This is my first time on Teams video, so there you go. I hope everybody is doing great this morning. And if there are any, I hate to say older, alumni watching this, they might remember this hairstyle because my hair hasn't been this long since 1996. That was the last time I had it this length. So I've had it curled, sprayed. I just walked from my bathroom to this chair, and I think it's lasted so far, but if this meeting goes too long, it'll just go. So Francesca said she was a Westerner who had never thought she would live on the East Coast. I grew up in Massachusetts and never thought I'd live in the South. So I guess we should never use the word never in all of these things because we never know where we're going to turn up. I have been in the burg of Chapel Hill for 31 years now. I came I actually bought my house on June 21st on the summer solstice of 1989. So 31 years ago, going on 32. And I think that puts me as the person who has been here the longest. I think Stephanie came like the month behind me. I have been in academia to one extent or another, I think every year of my life, actually, once I went to school at 6. So I was in school, I went to college, I taught 7th and 8th grade English in Massachusetts, and then I went off to Indiana to do an MLS, and then to North Carolina to do a master's in American Studies and the doctorate in Library and Information Science. And then I came to SILS, so it's been a totally academic life, for good or for bad, in all of that. The classes that I teach currently are, and the one that I really enjoy the most is archival appraisal. So just what is it that we put into an archives, right? I teach Introduction to Digital Curation, which is really, I'll tell you in a minute how digital curation came from digital archiving, which came from analog archiving. Digital preservation and access, which is a little more library oriented, and data curation and management, which is more data oriented. So how did I get into this whole archives thing? It wasn't exactly a planned path, right? So I always like to tell my students in classes that the story wasn't planned. I think even as a child, I thought I might be a professor someday, but definitely not in this field. I didn't even know this field existed. And in 1981, there was a big tax cutback passed in Massachusetts, and I was going to lose my job. So I went off to Indiana, and I said, well, like, what do I like to do? Where do I like to go? And I said, well, I like libraries. I'll go learn to be a librarian. And there was no archives in this at that point. And I enjoyed it enough that I went to University of Maryland after that, did a master's in American Studies because that was just so much fun. That's really, my undergraduate was in American Studies. And I really wanted to do a doctorate in that, but it became clear that as a woman in the 1980s, the mid 1980s at this point, 83, going to a state school, UPenn was the big American Studies program at that time, that I was not going to ever earn much of a living. And I'd be in someplace in some little school, someplace in the countryside. So I decided to go over and get my doctorate from CLIS, the College of Library and Information Services, I think it was, in Maryland. And I put those two things together. I put that love of history, a love of American documents, art, all of those things together with the information science and library services components. And that pushed me on toward looking at archives. The first time I went to a Society of American Archivists meeting was in 1985, and 25 years later, in 2010, I became the president of the Society of American Archivists. So there was clearly a love and admiration of the field. And I think if you look today, it is such an important field when we think about preserving evidence, and particularly in governmental settings. What are people doing? What is the evidence? How do you keep that evidence authentic, reliable, credible over time, understandable over time, findable, renderable if it's digital? And someplace around 1995 to 2000, the people working in archives in particular, and cultural heritage in the United Kingdom, started thinking there's so much content that we need to digitize, but now that it's digital, we have to keep this authentic. Now, we knew how to do that in an archive. We could tell if somebody had changed a document or if documents had gone missing. But to do that in the digital realm was an entirely different proposition. And particularly, most archivists at that time had very little training in anything digital. Hence the founding of the field really of digital curation, taking care of digital content through its life cycle, from the moment someone imagines they're going to create some content to the end of its life when we decide we're not going to keep it anymore. And everything in between. It's every aspect that touches our content. And you can think of content as papers and like traditional analog content, but you can also think of it as data. Just look at the problems the CDC had at the beginning of the pandemic. They were getting reports from states. Some were coming in digitally, some were coming in as spreadsheets attached to emails, some were coming in on fax, through fax. I didn't even know people were still using fax. Coming in through fax on paper. No wonder they couldn't tell what was going on in all the different states. And in so many states, there wasn't statewide coordination, right? So a whole lack of a network to bring that data to a place like CDC where they could make sense of it, right? That was really a failing that I don't know who you want to consider responsible for that, but it was something that CDC could not remediate in the moment because it was so diverse. So I am deeply concerned about archival values, about maintaining the authenticity, reliability of evidence, of content that we can consider evidence in all manner of setting, whether it's in educational, academic archives, government archives, business archives. But I'm also concerned with making sure that our data that we are creating and maintaining, and that we know what we have, good data. We talk a lot about big data and manipulation, but it all comes down to what data you have. So those are some of the issues that I talk about in my classes, and I hope to see you in the springtime if you're not already in my classes this fall. Take care now. Bye-bye.